As he saw it, using guile, charm, and smarts was a much better way to commit crimes than violence. He resorted to that only when absolutely necessary. The embezzlement conviction was nothing more than a one-time misstep on his part. Fortunately, the investigators on the case had been as dumb as most cops. Otherwise, he would probably be looking at life without parole on death row. In the processing area, Larson saw enough of the paperwork in front of a bleary-eyed guard to learn that he had been mistaken for another inmate with the same name, who was slated to do 18 months at Springer for a hit-and-run DWI accident. The guard looked like he'd been held over to work a second shift. He barely glanced at Larson as he processed him out. The state correctional officer cuffed Larson's hands behind his back and marched him to the sally port where an empty Department of Corrections van waited. "Am I your only passenger today, officer?" he asked as the guard pushed him into the passenger compartment behind the steel cage that protected the driver. The name tag on his uniform shirt read D. Trujillo. "You're it," Trujillo replied gruffly. Larson immediately started thinking that a breakaway might be possible. How to make it happen was the question. "Could you handcuff me at the front rather than behind my back?" he asked. "My arms and wrists really start to hurt when I'm cuffed this way." Trujillo thought about it. Larson was a middle-aged white guy with no priors who'd been convicted of non-violent crimes. "Okay, step out of the vehicle." Trujillo made the switch, put Larson back in the van, locked his feet to leg shackles bolted to the floorboards, closed the side door, and got behind the wheel. The sally port door opened, and sunlight poured into the dimly lit space. Larson did some mental calculating as Trujillo drove outside into the glare of a hot, cloudless July day. Springer was a good 200 miles up the interstate from Albuquerque. The drive gave him about 3 hours to figure out how to persuade Trujillo to stop, unshackle him, and let him out of the van. Even then, how would he get away? Trujillo packed a semi-automatic sidearm and had a shotgun in a rack attached to the dashboard within easy reach. Both weapons were formidable obstacles to any escape attempt. Larson listened as Trujillo advised a radio dispatcher that he was underway, transporting one prisoner. He held his breath, half expecting to hear Trujillo ordered back to the jail, but the radio remained silent. In a few minutes, they were beyond the perimeter of the jail grounds, cruising toward the interstate, and Larson started breathing easier. "I get really, really car sick sitting in the back," he said. "You can shit your pants and throw up all over yourself back there. It makes no matter to me," Trujillo replied. "I'll just crank up the air conditioner to get rid of the smell and hose down the inside of the vehicle after we get to Springer. I don't stop until we get there." "You'd do that rather than let me puke outside?" "Yeah," Trujillo said with a slight smile. "And if you puke on yourself, you'll get hosed down too." "Wonderful," Larson replied. "I thought Springer was a boys' school for juvenile delinquents." "It was up until a couple of years ago," Trujillo answered as he drove the van onto the northbound I-25 on-ramp. Trujillo looked like he was in his mid-50s, which made him 10 to 12 years older than Larson. He had a round head, cauliflower ears, pudgy cheeks, and didn't resemble any of the Trujillos that Larson had known in his youth. But he'd been away from his hometown for almost 25 years, and how people looked back then was pretty much a dim memory. Larson decided to probe. "Are you from Springer, Officer Trujillo?" Trujillo shot him a hard glance in the rearview mirror. "I don't need you trying to make small talk with me." Larson shrugged, smiled pleasantly, and looked out the window. In a few minutes they would be on the outskirts of Albuquerque heading north. Assuming the identity mix-up at the jail stayed undiscovered, what could he do to get free? He'd lied about getting carsick, but that ploy hadn't worked. Getting Trujillo to cuff his hands in front gave him more use of his hands and arms, but that would be of no advantage unless he got unshackled and out of the cage. Other than the puking idea, nothing came to him. He turned away from the window to find Trujillo checking up on him in the rear.